I'm Cassandra Wilson, 29, a financial analyst in Boston. That morning at Rosewood Chapel's bridal suite, surrounded by my bridesmaids, I was minutes from marrying Ryan Thompson, my partner of 4 years. At 11:30 a.m., 33 minutes before walking down the aisle, my phone buzzed against the marble countertop. One notification turned my perfect day upside down. All my accounts were frozen. My parents had financially sabotaged my wedding to stop me from marrying Ryan. They had no idea who they were messing with. Before I tell you how my perfect day turned into a financial nightmare, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe if you've ever dealt with toxic family members who try to control your life through money. I grew up in Greenwich, Connecticut, in a colonial-style mansion that screamed old money and privilege. My father, Harold Wilson, is a banking executive who treated our family finances like his personal fiefdom. From my first allowance at age 8, he scrutinized every penny I spent, requiring spreadsheets and receipts even for teenage mall trips. Financial discipline builds character, he'd say, while simultaneously undermining any independence I tried to establish. My mother, Eleanor, was cut from the same controlling cloth, though her domain was social connections rather than bank accounts. A former debutante from a good family, she orchestrated my life to maintain our family's standing in Connecticut society. The right schools, the right friends, the right extracurriculars that would look good on college applications. Nothing was ever about what I wanted. A Wilson never settles for second best became the exhausting mantra of my childhood. The pressure was relentless. Perfect grades, perfect appearance, perfect behavior. Any deviation resulted in lectures about family reputation and future prospects. When college application time came around, they had my life planned, Yale Law School, following my father's footsteps. I had other ideas. After a silent rebellion of applying to several business schools behind their backs, I chose Northwestern's finance program, 1,000 miles from their influence. The arguments lasted weeks. Finance is a stepping stone to law, my father eventually rationalized, allowing himself to accept my choice only by seeing it as temporary. You'll come to your senses after your undergraduate degree. I never did. Instead, I thrived. For the first time, I could breathe without their expectations suffocating me. I made real friends who liked me for myself, not my family name. I discovered I had a genuine talent for financial analysis and investment strategy. The irony wasn't lost on me. My father's financial drilling had given me the foundation for a career he never wanted me to have. After graduation, another bomb dropped at Sunday dinner. I've accepted a position at Meridian Investments in Boston. The silence was deafening. My mother's fork clattered against fine china. Boston? My father finally managed. We've discussed this, Cassandra. The position at Hartford Trust is waiting for you. Close to home, family connections. I didn't apply for it, I said simply. That night established the pattern for our relationship over the next several years: disappointment, attempts at manipulation, and my increasingly firm boundaries. Still, I maintained contact. They were my parents, after all, and despite everything, I hoped they might eventually accept my choices. Then I met Ryan Thompson at a charity gala in Boston. He wasn't the type of man my parents envisioned for me. A graphic designer who'd built his own small agency from scratch, Ryan came from a middle-class family in Michigan. No prestigious family name, no trust fund, no country club membership. What he did have was creativity, kindness, integrity, and a way of making me feel truly seen for the first time in my life. Our first date turned into weekly dates, which turned into him practically living at my apartment. With Ryan, I could be myself, not the polished, perfect Wilson daughter, but just Cassandra, with all my quirks and dreams and occasional insecurities. When my parents finally met him at Thanksgiving dinner, their disapproval was palpable. My mother's tight smile never reached her eyes. My father interrogated Ryan about his business model and 5-year projections as though conducting a hostile acquisition interview. "He seems nice," my mother said afterward, in that tone that meant exactly the opposite. "But darling, is he really someone with the right background for you?" "His background is irrelevant, Mom. I love him." My father was more direct. "Love doesn't pay mortgages, Cassandra. Think practically." What they didn't understand was that Ryan's different perspective on money was exactly what attracted me to him. He saw money as a tool for living, not as a scorecard or control mechanism. He worked hard, but knew when to stop and enjoy life. The concept was revolutionary to someone raised in the Wilson household. For years into our relationship, Ryan proposed during a weekend trip to Maine. The ring wasn't the flashy diamond my mother would have expected, but a unique sapphire design he'd worked with a local jeweler to create. It was perfect, and I said yes without hesitation. Breaking the news to my parents went exactly as expected. My mother immediately started talking about the proper venues and guest lists, including half of Connecticut's social register. My father cleared his throat and mentioned prenuptial agreements before even congratulating us. "That won't be necessary," I said firmly. "Don't be naive, Cassandra," he countered. "Every Wilson marriage has had proper financial protections. It's not personal, it's practical. Ryan and I will handle our finances our way." That became the battleground. My parents offered to contribute to the wedding, with strings attached. They wanted approval of the venue, the guest list, the menu, even my dress. Each time I refused their conditions, the contribution amount mysteriously decreased. I didn't care. Ryan and I were paying for most of the wedding ourselves. We chose Rosewood Chapel in Millbrook Springs, beautiful, but not ostentatious. We invited friends who actually mattered to us, not business connections. We planned a celebration that reflected our relationship, not my parents' social aspirations. Throughout the planning process, the tension escalated. My mother called daily with suggestions that were really demands. My father regularly checked in about the prenup I'd already refused multiple times. Each conversation left me drained and frustrated, but also more determined to marry Ryan on our terms. The week before the wedding, they seemed to finally accept defeat. They confirmed they'd attend, made dinner reservations for the rehearsal, and my mother even sent a surprisingly lovely note about being happy for me. I should have known it was too good to be true. The Wilsons never surrendered. They just changed tactics. The morning of my wedding day dawned perfect, clear blue skies, temperature in the low 70s, just enough breeze to rustle the chapel's surrounding maple trees. From my bridal suite window, I could see florists arranging white roses and hydrangeas along the garden path where guests would soon arrive. "Champagne for the bride," announced Heather, one of my bridesmaids, entering with a tray of mimosas. Diana and Kristen followed, already dressed in their sage green gowns, carrying garment bags with their makeup kits. Amy, my maid of honor and closest friend since college, supervised it all with clipboard efficiency. Hairstylist is running 15 minutes late, but makeup artist is already setting up in the corner suite. We're still on schedule. The next 2 hours passed in a blur of hairspray, mascara wands, and champagne toasts. My wedding dress, an elegant A-line with delicate lace detailing, hung by the window, catching morning light. Everything felt magical, like the perfect beginning to the next chapter of my life. "You look stunning," Amy said as the hairstylist pinned the last pearl clip into my updo. "Ryan's going to cry when he sees you." That's when my phone buzzed against the marble countertop. I almost ignored it. What could possibly be important enough to interrupt this moment? But some instinct made me reach for it. The notification froze me mid-movement. "Account access restricted. Please contact customer service regarding your account status." Frowning, I opened my banking app. Access denied. I tried another account. Same message. Credit cards. Investment accounts. Everything. "Cass? What's wrong?" Amy asked, noticing my expression. "I can't access any of my accounts." My voice sounded distant, even to myself. They're all locked. Diana looked up from her mimosa. Maybe it's just a system glitch? I was already dialing customer service, my hands shaking slightly. The representative was apologetic but firm. I'm showing a legal hold placed on all your accounts, Ms. Wilson. It was processed approximately 30 minutes ago. A legal hold? That's impossible. By whom? The request came from Harold Wilson, authorized by power of attorney documentation. The room seemed to tilt. That power of attorney, I'd signed it years ago when studying abroad, so my father could handle an investment opportunity that came up while I was in France. I'd forgotten it existed. He hadn't. There must be some mistake, I insisted. That power of attorney was for a specific transaction in 2016. It's not current. I'm afraid it doesn't have an expiration date, Ms. Wilson. You would need to formally revoke it. As I hung up, more notifications flooded my phone. The wedding venue payment reversed. Catering payment declined. Photographer transaction disputed. They're trying to stop my wedding, I whispered, the realization dawning with horrible clarity. Amy grabbed her own phone. I'll call the venue manager. Before she could dial, there was a sharp knock. Grace, the venue coordinator, entered with a panicked expression. Ms. Wilson, I'm so sorry to bother you, but there's an issue with the payment. The funds have been withdrawn from our account, and the bank is saying, I know. My voice was unnaturally calm now. My parents are behind this. As if on cue, my phone rang. My father's name flashed on the screen. With trembling fingers, I answered and put it on speaker. Cassandra. His voice was coolly professional, as though discussing a business transaction rather than destroying his daughter's wedding day. I believe you've noticed some financial irregularities this morning. How could you do this? The words caught in my throat. This is for your own good, he replied. This Thompson boy has clearly influenced you against your better judgment. A marriage without proper financial protections is not something I can allow. Allow? I repeated, anger starting to replace shock. I'm 29 years old. You don't allow me to do anything. As long as your finances are intertwined with family accounts, I have both the legal right and paternal obligation to protect our assets. It's quite simple. Cancel this inappropriate wedding, come home, and we'll sort this out reasonably. Continue with this mistake, and you'll do so without financial support of any kind. My bridesmaids exchanged horrified glances. Amy's hand squeezed my shoulder in silent support. You can't do this, I said, though I knew perfectly well that he could, and had. I've already done it. The choice is yours now. His tone softened slightly, which somehow made it worse. Cassandra, we only want what's best for you. In time, you'll understand. What's best for me is marrying Ryan. Then you'll do so without a penny to your name. The line went dead. I sat motionless, phone still in hand, tears threatening to ruin my carefully applied makeup. The beautiful day, the perfect wedding I'd planned for months, all of it collapsing around me because my parents couldn't bear losing control. What do we do now? Kristen asked quietly. I looked around at my friends' concerned faces, at the wedding dress still catching sunlight, at the chapel visible through the window where Ryan would be waiting for me. We need to talk to Ryan, I said finally. And then we need a plan. No, don't let him see the dress. Heather protested as Amy texted Ryan to come to the bridal suite. I think traditional superstitions are the least of our problems right now, I said, trying for humor but hearing my voice crack. When Ryan knocked and cautiously entered, his face shifted from excitement to concern in an instant. Handsome in his charcoal gray suit, he rushed to my side, ignoring whatever wedding traditions we were breaking. What happened? He asked, taking in my tear-streaked makeup and the tense atmosphere. I explained the situation in halting sentences, showing him the locked banking apps and the messages from vendors about reversed payments. With each detail, his expression darkened. Your parents did this? Today? Minutes before the ceremony. The disbelief in his voice mirrored what I'd felt when I first realized what was happening. They gave me an ultimatum. Cancel the wedding or be cut off completely. Ryan ran a hand through his carefully styled hair. Can they really do that? Legally? With that power of attorney, yes. At least temporarily. I could fight it in court eventually, but that doesn't help us today. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. No venue. No catering. No wedding, at least not the one we'd planned and paid for. We should postpone, Ryan finally said, though I could see how much it hurt him to suggest it. Regroup, sort out the financial mess, and do this properly when your parents can't interfere. I was about to agree when Amy stepped forward. No, she said firmly. That's exactly what they want. They're counting on you giving in. But the vendors, I began. I'll cover the immediate costs on my credit card, Amy interrupted. We can sort out repayment later. Jackson, Ryan's best man, had followed him to the bridal suite and now joined the conversation. I can help too. I've got savings. One by one, our friends stepped up. Diana could cover the photographer. Kristen's husband could handle the bar tab. Ryan's college roommate, now a successful chef, volunteered to smooth things over with the catering staff. Grace, the venue manager who'd been quietly listening by the door, cleared her throat. If you can provide alternative payment today, we can proceed. But I'll need something immediately to hold the reservation. Amy was already pulling out her credit card. Put it all on this for now. I looked around at these people, friends willing to step in when my own parents had stepped out, and felt a complicated mix of gratitude and determination. Are you sure about this? Ryan asked me privately while the others made calls and arrangements. We don't have to do this today. I looked into his eyes, kind, concerned, loving, and suddenly the decision was clear. I've never been more sure of anything, I replied. I'm marrying you today, with or without my parents' blessing or money. They don't get to win. With new resolve, we reconstructed our wedding day piece by piece. The ceremony would be delayed by an hour to sort out payments. The cocktail hour might have fewer premium options. The floral arrangements would be slightly scaled back. But we would be married. The next crisis hit when I realized my father was supposed to walk me down the aisle. The thought of that empty spot beside me threatened fresh tears. I'll walk alone, I decided. It's symbolic anyway. But as I prepared to line up for the processional, now running nearly 40 minutes late, Ryan's Uncle Thomas approached me. A kind-faced man in his 60s who'd always treated me like family, he hesitantly touched my elbow. Cassandra, I heard what happened, he said quietly. If you'd like someone to escort you, I'd be honored. Not to replace your father, of course, but just so you don't have to walk alone. The gesture was so unexpectedly kind that I could only nod, throat tight with emotion. When the music finally began and the chapel doors opened, I saw what mattered most. Ryan waiting at the altar, our friends filling the pews, faces full of support and love. The conspicuously empty front row seats where my parents should have been barely registered. Walking down the aisle on Thomas's arm, I felt a strange liberation. For years, I'd tried to balance my independence with my parents' expectations. Today, they'd forced me to choose, and in doing so, had freed me from that impossible balancing act. Our vows took on deeper meaning in light of the morning's events. When Ryan promised to stand by me in good times and bad, in plenty and in want, I knew he meant it. He was marrying me, not my family name or bank accounts. By the power vested in me, the officiant finally said, I now pronounce you husband and wife. As Ryan's lips met mine, applause erupted from our guests. We'd done it. Despite everything, we were married. But as we turned to face our friends as a newly married couple, I couldn't ignore the whispers and curious glances toward those empty seats. Everyone knew something had happened. The story would spread, questions would be asked, and our perfect day would forever carry the shadow. Walking back down the aisle, my hand firmly in Ryan's, I made a silent promise to myself. My parents had taught me that money was power. It was time to show them I'd learned that lesson all too well. The cocktail hour that followed our ceremony had an unusual energy, a mix of celebration and conspiracy. Our closest friends, now aware of the financial sabotage, formed a protective circle around us. Others sensed something was off, but didn't know exactly what, creating an undercurrent of curious whispers. Ryan and I huddled with Amy and Jackson in a quiet corner of the venue's garden, hastily reassessing our financial situation. "We've covered the venue and catering," Amy confirmed, scrolling through payment confirmations on her phone. Diana handled the photographer and videographer. "The florist agreed to a partial payment today with the balance next week." "I can't believe you're all doing this," I said, the reality of their generosity still sinking in. Ryan squeezed my hand. "We'll pay everyone back as soon as we sort this out." "What about the honeymoon?" Jackson asked. "The honeymoon, 2 weeks in Greece, fully paid and scheduled to begin tomorrow." Another casualty of my parents' actions. "We'll have to cancel," I said, the disappointment evident in my voice despite my efforts to stay positive. "There's no way we can afford it now." Ryan started to respond, but we were interrupted by the wedding coordinator announcing it was time for our entrance to the reception. Financial crisis or not, we had a roomful of guests waiting to celebrate with us. Jackson's best man speech carefully avoided mentioning my parents while emphasizing the strength of our relationship. "Some couples have an easy road," he said, raising his champagne flute. "Ryan and Cassandra have already proven they can weather storms together. That's not just love, that's partnership." The father-daughter dance presented another awkward moment. Rather than skip it entirely, Ryan's father Michael stepped in, his kind eyes understanding as he led me around the dance floor. "Family isn't always who you're born to," he told me quietly. "Sometimes it's who you choose." "Welcome to ours, Cassandra." His words brought fresh tears, happy ones this time, but the moment was interrupted by a notification on my phone, which I'd kept in a hidden pocket of my dress for emergency communications with vendors. Excusing myself to the bridal suite for a moment of privacy, I checked the message. It was from my mother, the first direct communication since my father's ultimatum call. "What you're doing today is a terrible mistake. We only froze your accounts to protect you from yourself. Someday you'll understand this was for your own good." The text sparked a fresh wave of anger, but it also triggered something else, a memory. Something important that I'd almost forgotten in the chaos of the day. 3 years ago, when I'd first started seeing real success in my career, I'd helped my parents restructure their retirement portfolio. They'd been impressed by my expertise, a rare moment of parental approval, and had allowed me to set up their accounts with a new investment firm. Logged into my secure cloud drive, I searched through old emails until I found what I was seeking: account numbers, passwords, security questions. At the time, I'd saved everything meticulously to ensure I could help them manage their investments. I hadn't accessed these records since setting up the accounts, respecting their financial privacy the way they'd never respected mine. But now, staring at this information, a plan began forming in my mind. The irony was almost too perfect. My father had always insisted on teaching me about financial power. Today, he'd used that power against me. But he'd forgotten one crucial detail: he wasn't the only one with access to family finances. As an authorized user on their retirement accounts, a status they'd granted to facilitate my help with the restructuring, I had the ability to place temporary holds just as they had done to me. I hesitated, finger hovering over the login button. This would be crossing a line. Vengeance rather than justice. Before I could decide, there was a soft knock at the door. I quickly closed the email as Tiffany, my college roommate and now a financial attorney, slipped into the room. "Hiding from your own reception?" she asked with a smile that faded when she saw my expression. "What's wrong?" "Besides the obvious parent situation that everyone's whispering about." I found myself explaining not just the day's events, but the plan forming in my mind. Tiffany listened attentively, her legal mind obviously analyzing as I spoke. "Could I actually do it?" I asked when I'd finished. Legally, I mean. She considered carefully before answering. As an authorized user, yes, you could place a temporary freeze for suspected fraudulent activity. Would it be ethical revenge rather than fraud prevention? That's murkier territory. They didn't seem concerned about ethics when they did it to me, I pointed out. True, she acknowledged. But remember, anything you do will have consequences beyond the satisfaction of payback. Before we could discuss further, Ryan appeared in the doorway. There you are. Everyone's asking for you. He noticed our serious expressions. Everything okay? Just needed a minute, I said, putting my phone away. Financial crisis talk can wait until tomorrow. He studied my face for a moment, then nodded. Tonight's about us. The rest is just details we'll figure out together. Taking his hand, I rejoined our reception, pushing thoughts of revenge aside for the moment. As we swayed together during our last dance, surrounded by sparklers held by our friends, I made another decision. Whatever I did next, it wouldn't be from a place of hurt and anger. It would be calculated, precise, and justified, a financial analyst's response, not an injured daughter's reaction. Sunlight streamed through the hotel's suite curtains when I woke the morning after our wedding. For one blissful moment, I remembered only that I was now Cassandra Thompson, married to the love of my life. Then reality crashed back. We were newlyweds facing financial devastation engineered by my own parents. Ryan was already awake, laptop open beside him on the bed, a coffee cup balanced precariously on the nightstand. Morning, wife, he said, leaning over to kiss me before returning to the screen. I'm checking our financial damage. Sitting up, I peered at the spreadsheet he'd created. The numbers were sobering. Between my frozen accounts and our joint accounts, which my father had also managed to freeze, we'd lost access to nearly everything. Our apartment deposit for the new place we'd planned to move into after the honeymoon. The honeymoon itself. Even our everyday checking accounts. I trailed off, the enormity of it hitting me freshly. A complete disaster? Ryan suggested with a wry smile. Yeah, but not unfixable. His optimism would have been irritating if it wasn't so necessary. I reached for my phone and began working through my own financial assessment. My parents had been thorough, but not perfect. They'd missed my personal investment account, smaller than the others, but still containing about $12,000 I could access immediately. Okay, first priority, I said, switching into problem-solving mode. We need to call all the wedding vendors and explain the situation. Most of them have temporary payments from our friends, but we need to arrange proper payment plans. Ryan nodded, already dialing the caterer. We spent the next hour making calls, explaining our situation without going into humiliating details, and arranging payment schedules. Most vendors were surprisingly understanding once they realized we weren't trying to skip out on bills. A knock at the door interrupted our financial triage. Amy stood outside with a cardboard tray holding large coffees and a bag of pastries. Thought you might need reinforcements, she said, setting everything down on the desk. How bad is it? I showed her our assessment while Ryan continued making calls in the background. We'll have to cancel the honeymoon, I concluded. There's no way around it. Already taken care of, Amy said, pulling out her phone to show me the cancellation confirmations. I called the travel agent last night. They're allowing a full credit for future booking, minus a small fee. You're a lifesaver, I told her sincerely. Just doing my maid of honor duties. She hesitated. I also have this. She handed me an envelope containing $1,500 in cash. Emergency fund from your friends. We all chipped in. The generosity left me speechless. These people had already covered our wedding costs, and now they were giving us their own money to help us through. After Amy left, Ryan finished his calls and joined me on the small couch by the window. I've been thinking about the honeymoon, he said. What if we don't cancel entirely? I have about $3,000 in my personal savings account they couldn't touch. We could do a shortened trip. Not Greece, but maybe a few days somewhere closer. You'd spend your savings on that? After everything that's happened. We're not letting them take this from us too, he said firmly. We deserve a honeymoon, even if it's just a long weekend at a beach somewhere. His determination to salvage something of our plans touched me deeply. While he showered, I returned to the financial puzzle facing us. That's when I reopened the emails about my parents' retirement accounts. The more I examined the information I had, the clearer it became that I still had legal access to their retirement portfolio. As an authorized user with my credentials still active, I could place a temporary freeze on their accounts. The same type of freeze they'd used against me. This wasn't about stealing their money. It was about giving them a taste of their own medicine, creating leverage to force them to undo what they'd done. And perhaps, teaching them a lesson about weaponizing financial power. I called Tiffany again, needing her legal perspective before I proceeded. If I temporarily freeze their retirement funds as an authorized user, citing unusual activity as the reason, what's my potential liability? I asked after explaining my refined plan. Since you're not withdrawing funds, just restricting access temporarily, your liability is minimal, she explained. You could argue you noticed unusual activity, which, technically, you did when they used their access to your accounts. The freeze is a protective measure pending investigation. And I have documentation of what they did to me, which strengthens your position considerably. Just don't make any statements that could be construed as retaliatory. This is about protection, not revenge, at least officially. I thanked her and hung up, my plan crystallizing. When Ryan emerged from the shower, I laid it out for him. You want to freeze your parents' retirement accounts? He repeated, looking concerned. Cass, I understand why, but isn't that escalating the situation? They escalated first, I pointed out. They didn't just cut me off, they actively sabotaged our wedding day. They need to understand there are consequences. Ryan sat beside me, running a hand through his damp hair. I'm not saying they don't deserve it. I'm just worried about what this does to any chance of reconciliation. Honestly, I'm not sure I want reconciliation with people who would do this, I admitted. But this isn't just about punishment. It's about leverage. Once they realize I can affect their finances just as they affected mine, they'll have motivation to unfreeze our accounts. After further discussion, Ryan reluctantly agreed. Understanding this was ultimately my decision regarding my relationship with my parents. That afternoon, I systematically documented everything my parents had done, compiling bank notifications, vendor emails about reverse payments, and the transcript of my father's threatening call which I'd recorded. With this evidence secured, I contacted Benjamin Rothstein, a family lawyer Amy had recommended. What you're describing is financial abuse, Benjamin confirmed after reviewing my documentation. The power of attorney they used was for a specific purpose years ago, and while it may not have an explicit expiration, using it in this manner could be considered a breach of fiduciary duty. With legal confirmation that my parents' actions were potentially actionable, I felt more confident in my response plan. If they wanted to play financial hardball, they'd discover I'd learned from the best. We departed for our abbreviated honeymoon the next day, a 4-day stay at a beachfront hotel in Rhode Island instead of 2 weeks in Greece. It wasn't what we'd planned, but as we walked along the shore at sunset, I realized Ryan had been right. We needed this time together, away from the chaos, to start our marriage on our terms. The weekend gave me clarity and calm. By the time we returned to Boston, moving into a smaller apartment than we'd originally planned, I was ready to execute my plan. Not from anger, but from a position of calculated strength. Our new apartment was half the size of the luxury unit we'd planned to rent. The furniture we'd purchased for our intended home crowded the smaller space, making navigation a constant puzzle. But it was ours, paid for with Ryan's savings and my untouched investment account. 3 days after returning from our mini honeymoon, I sat at our cramped kitchen table and implemented my plan. Using the credentials I still possessed, I logged into my parents' retirement portfolio management system. As an authorized user with security verification, I had access to place what the system called a protective hold on the accounts. My finger hovered over the confirmation button for several seconds. Once pressed, there would be no going back. This would transform a one-sided attack into open financial warfare. I clicked it. The system generated an automatic notification to the account holders, my parents, informing them that unusual activity had triggered a security protocol, freezing access to all funds pending verification. The hold would remain in place until the authorized parties completed a verification process. That verification process would require my approval. With that single click, I'd frozen approximately $4.3 million in retirement assets. Not withdrawing or stealing, simply restricting access the same way they'd restricted mine. Then I waited. Ryan came home from his design studio that evening to find me still at the kitchen table, laptop open, monitoring my email and phone. "Did you do it?" he asked, setting down his bag. I nodded. "About 6 hours ago." "And?" "Nothing yet. But they might not have tried to access the accounts today." We didn't have to wait much longer. At 8:17 p.m., my phone rang. My father's name flashed on the screen. I put it on speaker so Ryan could hear. "Hello, Father," I answered calmly. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" His voice vibrated with rage. "I just received notification that our retirement accounts are frozen." "How distressing that must be for you," I replied evenly. "Having your finances unexpectedly restricted without warning or explanation. I can't imagine how that feels." The silence on the other end told me he'd understood the pointed parallel immediately. "This is completely different," he finally said, his tone shifting to the patronizing one he used for business negotiations. "We acted to protect family assets from an impulsive decision. You're committing financial sabotage." Interesting perspective. I saw unusual activity in family accounts, specifically the unauthorized use of an outdated power of attorney to freeze my personal assets on my wedding day, and took protective action pending investigation. That's the explanation I'll provide to any financial authority who asks. Another silence, longer this time. I could practically hear him recalculating his position. "You can't do this," he finally said, but with less certainty. "I already have. Just as you did to me." I kept my voice steady, professional. "The difference is, I have documentation of your actions, which legal counsel informs me potentially constitute financial abuse and breach of fiduciary duty." In the background, I heard my mother's voice asking questions, then the muffled sound of my father covering the phone to respond to her. When he returned, there was a new edge of concern in his voice. "Your mother wants to speak with you." A rustling sound, then my mother's voice, tight with controlled emotion. "Cassandra, what are you doing? This isn't like you." "Actually, Mother, this is exactly like me. A financial analyst protecting assets from questionable activity. I learned from the best, after all." "We were trying to protect you," she insisted. "That boy." "My husband," I corrected sharply. "His name is Ryan. And this had nothing to do with protection. It was about control." "You don't understand what marriage means yet," she continued, ignoring my correction. "Your father and I have been married 35 years. We know the importance of financial compatibility." "What you know is financial manipulation," I countered. "And you've taught me that lesson thoroughly. Now I'm showing you I learned it." My mother's composure cracked slightly. "You can't keep our retirement funds frozen indefinitely. You're putting our future at risk. Exactly as you did to mine on my wedding day." I paused, then continued in a more businesslike tone. "I've already spoken with Benjamin Rothstein at Rothstein Legal about your unauthorized use of an expired power of attorney. He was quite interested in the case." At the mention of a prominent family law attorney, I heard my father take the phone back. "You contacted Rothstein?" His voice had lost some of its confident bluster. "This is a family matter, Cassandra. It doesn't need to involve lawyers." "It became a legal matter when you illegally froze my accounts. Now we have two options. Either we both engage attorneys and let this play out in court, with all the public attention that would entail, or we can resolve it privately. What do you want? He asked, cutting to the chase as he always did when recognizing a negotiating position. It's quite simple. You unfreeze all my accounts and restore full access. You transfer the exact amount you withdrew from wedding vendors back to me to cover the costs our friends fronted. You provide written revocation of any power of attorney documents you hold. Once those steps are verified, I'll release the hold on your retirement funds. And if we refuse? Then I maintain the hold while pursuing legal action for financial abuse and breach of fiduciary duty. The documentation has already been prepared. Benjamin awaits my call. A tense silence followed. I could imagine my father's face, the calculation happening behind his eyes as he weighed options and outcomes. We'll need to verify that your proposed resolution is legally sound, he finally said. Of course. I expected nothing less. Shall we meet tomorrow to discuss details? Perhaps with respective counsel present. After setting a meeting time at a neutral location, an upscale Boston restaurant with private dining rooms, I ended the call and looked at Ryan, who had listened to the entire exchange in silent amazement. That was, he began. Necessary, I finished for him. They only understand power. Now they know I have some too. The next day, Ryan and I arrived at the restaurant 15 minutes early, accompanied by Benjamin Rothstein. My parents were already there, my father in his customary dark suit, my mother elegant in navy blue, both looking tense and unhappy. Their attorney, Victoria Winters, sat stiffly beside them. The initial exchanges were coldly polite. Beneath the civility, I could sense my father's fury and my mother's distress. They hadn't expected this, their obedient daughter turned financial warrior. Let's be clear about what happened, Benjamin began after pleasantries were exhausted. Mr. and Mrs. Wilson utilized an outdated power of attorney to freeze their daughter's accounts specifically to prevent her wedding. This constitutes both financial abuse and a clear breach of fiduciary duty. Victoria Winters countered with legal justifications about the power of attorney's validity, but her arguments sounded hollow even to my untrained ear. As the lawyers debated, my father finally addressed me directly. Was this really necessary, Cassandra? This legal circus? We only wanted what's best for you. What's best for me is making my own choices, I replied. What's best for me is marrying the man I love without financial sabotage. What's best for me is not what you get to decide anymore. We've supported you your entire life, my mother interjected. Paid for the best schools, given you every advantage. And this is how you repay us? By marrying someone beneath your station and freezing our retirement when we object. Ryan stiffened beside me at the beneath your station comment, but maintained his composure. I froze your accounts because you froze mine, I said simply. Actions have consequences. That's another lesson you taught me. Hours of negotiation followed. My father tried every tactic, appeals to family loyalty, veiled threats about future inheritance, attempts to separate me from Ryan for private family discussion. I refused each maneuver calmly but firmly. By late afternoon, we had an agreement. They would unfreeze all my accounts immediately. They would reimburse all wedding expenses. They would formally revoke any remaining power of attorney. In exchange, I would release the hold on their retirement funds and sign an agreement not to pursue legal action. As we prepared to leave, my mother caught my arm. He seems to really love you, she said quietly, glancing at Ryan, who was speaking with Benjamin near the door. He does, I confirmed. And I love him. That should have been enough for you. Something shifted in her expression, not quite acceptance, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. Will we see you again? She asked, and I heard genuine uncertainty in her voice. That depends on you, I replied honestly. I'm not cutting you off. But there will be boundaries now. Clear ones. My father approached, having overheard the exchange. He studied me with a new expression, one I'd rarely seen directed at me. It looked almost like respect. You're more like me than I realized, he said, not entirely as a compliment. In some ways, I acknowledged. but I'll use what I learned from you differently. As we left the restaurant, Ryan squeezed my hand. You were incredible in there. I did what was necessary, I said, but felt no triumph. Only a sad clarity about my relationship with my parents and a new determination to build something healthier with the family Ryan and I might create someday. The financial war was over. We had won the battle, but the deeper conflict, the one about control, respect, and acceptance, remained unresolved. That would take much more than legal agreements to address. It would take time, change, and willingness on all sides. Whether my parents were capable of that remained to be seen. 6 months after our wedding day, Ryan and I sat at an elegant table in Lavoil, an upscale French restaurant in Back Bay. Across from us, looking uncomfortable but present, were my parents. This was our third dinner together since the financial standoff, each one slightly less tense than the last. Your new apartment looks lovely, my mother commented, making an effort at normal conversation. The view of the Charles River must be wonderful. It is, I agreed, especially at sunset. After the financial settlement, we'd been able to find a beautiful apartment, not the luxury high-rise we'd originally planned, but a charming brownstone with character and space for Ryan's home office. More importantly, it was entirely ours, purchased with a mortgage we qualified for based on our own merits and income, with no parental involvement. The market in that area is appreciating nicely, my father noted, unable to resist a financial observation. Good investment. We chose it because we love it, Ryan said pleasantly. The investment potential is secondary. I noticed my father's slight wince at this prioritization, but he nodded politely. The waitress arrived with our entrees, providing a welcome break in conversation. As we ate, I reflected on the journey of the past 6 months. The day after our legal agreement, all my accounts had been unfrozen as promised. The wedding expenses had been reimbursed, allowing us to repay our friends. The power of attorney had been formally revoked, with documentation provided by their attorney. True to my word, I had immediately released the hold on their retirement accounts. Transaction completed, debt repaid. But the emotional ledger wasn't so easily balanced. For weeks afterward, there was silence. No calls, no emails. I hadn't expected immediate reconciliation, but the complete absence of contact surprised me. It was Ryan who encouraged me to make the first move. If you want a relationship with them, any kind of relationship, someone has to start, he'd said. So I'd sent a brief email. Nothing dramatic, just an update on our new apartment and jobs. My mother had responded with equal brevity, but left the door open for further communication. From there, we'd begun rebuilding cautiously, with clear boundaries established. I would not discuss our household finances with them. Ryan was not up for debate or critique. My career and life choices were my own. How is the new client portfolio going? My father asked now, pulling me back to the present. The tech startup group you mentioned last time. Very well, I replied, surprised and pleased he'd remembered this detail from our last dinner. We've developed a specialized investment strategy for early-stage companies that's showing strong preliminary results. I'd be interested in hearing more about that approach sometime, he said, then quickly added, professionally speaking, of course. Not as interference. This acknowledgement that his interest could be perceived as interference represented progress. Small, but significant. I'd be happy to discuss it, I offered. Professional to professional. My mother turned to Ryan, making her own effort. And your design agency? Cassandra mentioned you won an award recently. Ryan nodded, setting down his fork. The AGA Regional Excellence Award for our work with the Children's Hospital. It's opened some interesting doors for new clients. That's impressive, she said, and though her smile remained somewhat stiff, her words seemed genuine. As dinner progressed, conversation remained careful but civil. We discussed neutral topics, books, travel, a recent exhibit at the Museum of Fine Arts. Not once did my parents mention their disappointment in our marriage or my rebellion, as they'd once termed it. After dessert, as we prepared to leave, my father hesitated, then reached into his jacket pocket. "We brought something for you," he said, producing a small, wrapped package. A belated housewarming gift. I accepted it cautiously, years of experience making me wary of gifts with strings attached. Opening it revealed a beautiful silver frame containing a professional photo from our wedding, one of the few with all four of us, taken during the tense reception before I discovered their financial sabotage. "It's a lovely picture," my mother said softly. Despite everything, the photo showed Ryan and me in the center, glowing with happiness despite the day's chaos, flanked by my parents who managed to look appropriate if not joyful. A family portrait of contrasts. "Thank you," I said sincerely. The gift wasn't extravagant or manipulative, just a simple acknowledgement of our marriage as reality. After saying our goodbyes outside the restaurant, Ryan and I walked home along the lamplit streets of Boston. "That went better than last time," he observed. "It did," I agreed. Still awkward, but less combative. "Do you think they're actually accepting us, or just realizing they can't change things?" I considered this. Maybe a bit of both. They're practical people. Even if they still disapprove, they've recognized that maintaining a relationship with me means accepting you too. "The lowest of bars," he joked, "but I'll take it." 6 months after that dinner, a full year post-wedding, we invited my parents to our home for the first time. The visit wasn't without tension, but it represented another step forward. My mother brought flowers and commented genuinely on our decor. My father refrained from offering unsolicited financial advice. Most significantly, I watched them interact with Ryan without the thinly veiled disdain of before. They asked about his work, listened to his stories, and even laughed at his jokes. Not the behavior of people who had fully embraced him as family, perhaps, but a far cry from their previous rejection. Over the next year, our relationship continued its cautious evolution. We established a pattern of monthly dinners, occasional emails, and holiday gatherings that were increasingly less strained. My parents never explicitly apologized for what they'd done on our wedding day. That wasn't their style, but their consistent respect for my boundaries spoke volumes. For my 30th birthday, they sent a card with a check. The amount was generous, but not excessive, not an attempt to buy influence. The accompanying note simply read, "To use as you wish." No strings attached. I deposited it into the savings account Ryan and I had established for eventually starting a family, our choice, our future. 2 years after our wedding day disaster, we hosted a dinner party in our brownstone apartment. Friends filled our dining room and spilled into the living room, the atmosphere warm with conversation and laughter. Among them, somewhat reserved but present, were my parents. I watched from the kitchen as Ryan engaged my father in a discussion about a documentary series they'd both watched. In the living room, my mother chatted with Amy about her recent promotion. They weren't the center of our social circle, but they were part of it, one piece of the varied mosaic of relationships we'd built. Later, as guests departed and Ryan cleared dishes, my father approached me on the small balcony where I'd stepped out for a moment of quiet. "You've built a good life here," he said, looking out at the city lights rather than at me directly. "Different than what I envisioned for you, but good." From him, this constituted high praise. "Thank you," I replied simply. "I still think about what happened," he continued, surprising me with this reference to our unspoken past. "Your wedding day. The accounts." He paused. It wasn't my finest moment. This was as close to an apology as Harold Wilson had likely ever offered anyone. "No," I agreed. "It wasn't." "You outplayed me," he said, and I caught the hint of rueful admiration in his tone. "Used my own tactics against me." "I learned from the best," I replied, echoing my words from our confrontation. But this time, they carried a different weight, less accusation, more acknowledgement of a complex inheritance. Inside, I could hear Ryan laughing with friends, the sound of the life we'd built together despite everything. A life that now, tentatively, had room for my parents, not as controllers or directors, but as participants on our terms. The wealth I'd accumulated wasn't measured in accounts or investments anymore. It was calculated in boundaries respected, independence maintained, and relationships rebuilt on healthier foundations. A different kind of financial education than my father had intended to provide, but perhaps the most valuable one I'd received. As we stood watching the city lights, I realized we'd both learned something through our financial warfare. He'd learned I couldn't be controlled through money. I'd learned that true wealth wasn't about financial power, but about the freedom to choose your own path and the courage to defend it. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have frozen your parents' retirement accounts as I did, or found another way to handle their financial sabotage? Drop a comment below with your thoughts, and if this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more about navigating complicated family dynamics. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that standing up for yourself isn't just okay. Sometimes it's absolutely necessary. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that sometimes the family we choose is more valuable than the family we're born into.